Welcome to Jikoni Magic, home of authentic Kenyan foods, and today we're making fermented wimbi uji. This is a recipe that has been requested so much. For example, Evelyn was still waiting on her fermented uji recipe 7 months ago, and Sam 2009 requested a recipe for uji wa wimbi. So without much further ado, let's get right into it, and let's start with our main ingredient, which is the flour. Now the flour can either be wimbi, mawele, terere, omena, a mixture of all this. It's up to you. In this recipe, I am using plain wimbi flour. So next, I poured it into my plastic bottle, the one that I normally use for fermenting my uji, and added just enough water to cover it. The amount of water that you add is really dependent on the amount of flour that you have started off with and how thin or thick you like your uji to be. Previous video, I made very delicious fermented uji from fresh maize. You can check it out and learn a different technique of making fermented uji. Then next, I shook it until all the flour had mixed with the water. And also remember to cork your bottle very loosely so that as the fermentation takes place, the gases have somewhere to escape through. And this is 2 days later. As you can see from the top, there's that stuff that floats on top as the fermentation takes place. Right? That's the top view. And I also wanted to show you the side view. There are the bubbles that indicate that as fermentation is taking place, gases are released, and it's important for you to cork your bottle loosely for the gases to escape. Okay. And yeah, I shook the bottle, made sure that all the flour that had settled at the bottom got mixed up with all the water that was in the bottle, and then I poured out the mixture into a separate container, making sure that I left just a bit in the container that was going to act as the stock for future fermentation, right? And the next step was cooking. I normally start by boiling a cup of water, and once it's come to a boil, I pour my fermented mixture into the sufuria, making sure that I'm continuously stirring to prevent the formation of any lumps. Lumpy uji is very unattractive, and so just keep stirring on and off. Give it a rest, stir it again, give it a rest, stir it again until it begins to thicken. And as I'm cooking this uji, it's important for me to mention that in one of the requests for the fermented uji, someone asked me what I normally do if my uji ends up being thicker than I had anticipated. And I deliberately made this uji very thick so that I could answer her question. See how thick it is? It can barely flow. And so what I do is I normally add very hot water. In fact, it's boiling water that I add. I add a little at a time, stir, and make sure that it's all incorporated within the uji. Then I assess. If it's still too thick for me, I add a bit more, stir, make sure that it's incorporated again. I assess until the uji comes to the consistency that I want. Now, if you make the mistake of adding cold water to your uji, you're going to end up with uji that will break up, almost like it's curdled, meaning that you're going to end up losing the smoothness of your uji. And so at this point, I was finally satisfied with the consistency of my uji, right? And that's when I added my sugar. Sugar is really up to you. Add it according to your taste. Stir and make sure that it mixes in properly. I like adding my sugar while I'm cooking my uji because I find like it dissolves much better. And this is citric acid. If you don't have the citric acid, you can squeeze in fresh lemon juice, or you can just totally leave out this step. It's very optional. And that's like about it. Your uji is almost done. Reduce the heat. Let your uji simmer on low heat for about 5 minutes until it's totally cooked, and take it off the heat. In my previous video where I made fermented uji from fresh maize, I demonstrated in detail how I cool my uji. If you're interested, click on the link I've provided up there and go check it out. Next, I served my uji in my huge mug that takes about 500 ml at a go, and I curled up on the sofa and enjoyed it. It was one of those cold Saturday evenings, and at this point I'll just say thank you so much for having joined me. Until next time, keep it Jikoni magic for more exciting Kenyan recipes. Goodbye.